Welcome to The Founder's Mind. This is your host, Adam Muchler. On this episode, I have Tonio DeSorrento, founder and CEO of Vemo, an income-based repayment platform for educational institutions. Listen in as Tonio shares his experience as a founder and in building Vemo. Tonio, thank you for having me at your offices here in, I always get confused exactly where I am. Alexandria?
No, we are in
Arlington.
Arlington.
Exactly. I grew up in Maryland, so admittedly, I have very poor understanding of Virginia. But thank you for having me at your offices. And where I like to start is just a little bit from you on what you're up to. What is this company? And what's going on? Where am I?
Vemo Education, and you are in our world headquarters here in Roslyn. Vemo Education, 3 years old, 38 people and growing.
Nice.
About 38 clients and growing, 39 maybe as of today. And we answer the question as to higher ed, is this worth it? So there was a time when people looked at college aspirationally and they'd say, simply, can I afford this? Mm-hmm. And that got us a student debt crisis. It got us runaway tuition inflation. It got us tuition that was increasing faster than the earnings of graduates. And this disconnect then formed between students and parents and colleges. And so now if students and parents are asking, is this worth it? Colleges have to respond. Schools of all kinds have to respond. Mm-hmm. If you're going to charge real money for this thing, how do you show that it's worth it?
Yeah.
So colleges need a tool for that. We think what they need is the ability to link tuition to graduates' outcomes. So at Vemo, we let colleges use a contract called an income share agreement mm-hmm. to charge some or all of their tuition as a percent of graduates' earnings. And by letting them do that, they're able to say to someone, do not pay and pray. Don't pay up front and see if it works.
Sure.
Pay for success. Pay if this thing works. As defined, works means get a good early career path.
Yeah.
And I know that the higher ed's diverse and there's a lot of reasons people go to post-secondary education. A lot of reasons society subsidizes it. There's a public good to have an educated citizenry.
Yeah.
Lots of people don't need money or jobs and they just want to wander. Some people are from great backgrounds, great families, and they're just going to go for prestige.
Yeah.
And that gets measured and ranked in different ways. Those things get measured, ranked, however they get ranked. But 80+% of students and parents actually are seeking a job. That's 100% of adult learners, 100% of people from tough economic backgrounds looking for upward mobility. So colleges need a way to communicate to them that they are worth what they charge. And by the way, college is worth it when it works, when you get a job.
Yeah.
It's very valuable. So Vemo makes that happen. And when you sell something to a college, in most kinds of schools, they don't do a lot of their non-teaching or non-academic functions themselves. They outsource a lot. Mm-hmm. They rely on others. And so
like platforms and such.
Yeah. So the learning management system, the attendance system, facilities maintenance, we run these pay for success tuition programs for schools.
That's awesome. I love it. I was doing a little reading on your website, and this is actually something that interests me greatly. My wife and I both had very different collegiate experiences. She went to school 4 years, undergrad, 1 year master's. I went to school part-time for basically 9 years while I worked. I went to 5 schools. I went to some community colleges. I went to some private schools. And, across both of our academic experiences, we have student loans, and we talk about it a lot. It's a big part of our financial conversation. One of the things that she experienced in an undergraduate level is some of the not promises that the university made, but examples that they would say, people that go through this program make X amount when they graduate, which was not the case. And she got a great job at a top PR firm, right? But there's this huge disconnect between the cost of education, to your point, and where are students getting their first job, or where are they starting their career, even if they're top of field. It's just not the same. It's very interesting.
That's right. Most colleges have no granular outcomes data. So they don't know what happens to their graduates. And to their credit, many attempt to learn, but they're learning through some self-reported survey.
Yeah.
3% response rate. And they're turning it into marketing. So they're immediately turning around and making it into puffery, which is a legal word for not totally honest marketing. And I will say this, like, that's a happy world to live in some ways. I mean, ignorance can be bliss, if everybody's above average, right? All the 20 college presidents in a room, raise your hand if you're below average, right? Well, 10 would be below average and 10 would be above average in any given thing.
Yeah.
There's no ownership of that. We're finding that, look, nobody makes a college work with Vemo, with my company.
Sure.
And so, not every college is going to do this. However, the ones who are very serious about outcomes, who want to get out of that place of ignorance of their graduates, who want to get earnings data, and who want to be transparent about what happens so they can improve on it.
Yeah.
They're choosing to work with us. And so I think that we're finding the good ones who are investing in outcomes and they accept responsibility for those outcomes.
Yeah.
They're opting into this. And you're going to see then over time, they're going to build this really robust set of data that you can rely on, that shows here's the range of what happens, here's the average of what happens, here's the median, in a way that they just haven't had before.
Yeah. How did you get into this? I mean, we talked a little bit about your background, I think, before we hit record, but how did you find yourself in this business, in this space, connected to, I mean, it's a systemic problem. We can both agree.
Yes. Yeah. Well, my story is, there's a story to how I got here. So I started my career in the Marine Corps, had a great experience, and got out to attend law school. Mm-hmm. Law school is when I got my first job in education finance. So I needed a job getting out of the Marines and going to law school. I started working at Sallie Mae, a big student loan company.
Sure.
I learned a lot there, moved on to a law firm, continued working in education finance, and had a bunch of clients doing pretty innovative things, including income share agreements, which are these contracts that Vemo does with our college clients. Every one of those clients of mine, though, pivoted or failed in that particular niche. Now, we had other ones that were very successful. I ended up being recruited out of my law firm to join SoFi, which is a big non-bank lender now. I was an early employee there.
I get mail from them.
A lot of people see SoFi ads, in DC, right, or in big cities. Yeah. So SoFi started out as a student lender and became a more diversified non-bank financial services business. I'm really proud of what we did at SoFi. I think that we built something special, and there's definitely a nexus there to education finance, which has been my passion. Mm-hmm. But you can look at what it's become, and as many people as we helped, it was more finance than education.
Yeah.
And so as I was sitting there observing this thing happening and helping, I felt like it wasn't the solution to this problem of value.
Yeah.
On the one hand, and on the other hand, the things that I was seeing succeed there, the tools SoFi had, or the way that SoFi scaled and won.
Sure.
And really, every startup's hard. It's hard to scale. SoFi was scaling and winning. I thought if I took what I learned there and applied it to income-based finance, to charging for value, that I could succeed. And so what brought me to Vemo was the understanding. I spotted this thing that, like, man, if you did this with colleges as clients, it would be so much more valuable than simply connecting investors and students or something. But Don't use this to help people pick between a loan and something else. Use it to help people pick between a college that says, we don't take responsibility for your outcome, and one that does take responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll take responsibility when you become a known figure or someone who can write big checks. There's a little bit of a difference. What did you? So I'm always curious. You worked in finance. You have this law background and even this military background, and you find yourself. It sounds like you acquired a lot of knowledge in this space, and you started to connect some dots. What was that transition like from working for? I don't know if SoFi was the last company you worked for before you started your company. What was that? What was sort of that transition like? Where you said, I think I have something here and I'm going to start pursuing it?
Well, I've always felt entrepreneurial, but I never felt like I needed to be a CEO.
Yeah.
So I loved making or building new things, and I loved novelty. And I was very accepting, though, of my role as a lawyer at SoFi and my ability to contribute in that role. And I was happy as an individual contributor. I didn't need to be in charge. I found, though, that once I saw this business that has become Vemo, I couldn't unsee it.
Yeah.
First of all, so I couldn't unsee it. So I'm getting haunted by this. Like,
you know something.
I'm thinking about it all the time. I'm obsessed, and other people could not see it, and they were not obsessed, and so that made me the right guy to be the CEO of this thing.
Yeah.
Like I knew that I already know what the future's supposed to look like, and I have to just catch everybody else up. You know, so I can see. I've been living 5 years from the present for the past 3 years.
Sure.
It's always 5 years from today that I feel like I can see that far. And I remember at SoFi, the CEO there, the original founder CEO, Mike Cagney, would talk about things that were around more than one corner, basically. So I could see around one corner maybe as a guy working there, like, oh, I know the next thing we'll do.
Sure.
I could see maybe 2 years ahead. He could always see two corners, and it wasn't always right.
Yeah.
But he always was sure about that. And I felt like I had that as to Vemo.
Yeah. It was just there.
Yeah, I can see it. And I cannot always, unfortunately for me and my colleagues and maybe my investors, I haven't always been the best person at communicating that. So I wasn't a natural show person or showman or presenter. I've developed or devoted a lot of time to improving, and I still have a lot of improvement to do. Yeah. Originally, I think I did a pretty poor job of communicating the dream.
Yeah.
And so it took a lot of work on the part of the people, my colleagues and my investors, to meet me there. Like, they really had to do work on their end.
Mm-hmm. So what was the inflection point? You have a job, and I'm assuming at the time you also had at least some of your 4 kids, if not all of them. So, there it wasn't like there was no risks involved. What was that? I don't know if it was a jump, or what was that progression from being employed, and having this job and saying, I'm going to do this, and it's happening.
Well, you raised a good point. I'm an older founder with a complicated life and real obligations outside of work. And my kid's mother wasn't working, so I was the sole breadwinner for that family. And as much as I'd always thought entrepreneurship was cool, one thing that had kept me in a job was the need to provide for my family. So I think a few things contributed. One was I had earned over time more respect in my field.
Sure.
So I knew that I could get meetings with investors. I knew, though, that on the open market, I could earn real money. Yeah. So if this fails, I will get a job.
Yeah,
I've done a real thing.
Yeah.
I had some SoFi stock.
Sure.
And SoFi stock was, it still is very valuable. And I knew that in a pinch, I could sell that for something. Mm-hmm. So I basically had to earn something on my own. I practiced law for a while. I didn't get to start right away being a founder of a company. I had to go earn and make wealth for others. But then I was really confident that I'd get a job if I needed it. I had some assets that I knew I could get cash flows for my family if I needed to. And finally, I was a venture partner for a fund called Learn Capital, an education venture capital fund. And I got connected through them to an investor who was very passionate about this. And so I was able to line up. I would say he lined me up more than I lined him up. But I was aligned with an investor, a seed investor, before I even quit my job.
Yeah.
And so it's so rare that happens for people.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate that that's how that went.
Did you have a business plan? Did you have a brand? There was this thing you were talking about, or was it just like this loose, like, napkin of an idea, and all of this stuff was lined up?
I was determined to work on this kind of thing.
Yeah.
While I was still at SoFi, I was determined that I would eventually leave SoFi and work on something like this.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure I was going to be the CEO of a business.
Yeah.
Or necessarily even the co-founder of a business. Mm-hmm. I knew that I was going to get to pick my next job, though, because I'd earned some career capital, both political, human capital, money capital. I'd earned the chance to pick my next job, and I knew that it would be related to this idea. Mm-hmm. What got me to over the all the way in was I'd already quit SoFi. I'd already started working on it with my initial backer, and I was still the only one who could see this thing.
Yeah.
So I just knew it. And honestly, the other people involved with it knew it also. And so among my co-founders, who are really accomplished people, I have 3 co-founders, Bill, Jeff, and Renee. They acceded to letting me be CEO based on that.
Yeah. It's kind of just being the originator and that vision that you're talking about.
I think so. I mean, they trusted me. They knew none of us had the background of being a successful CEO. So we were all great at some function that was really important to the company. So somebody was going to have to learn to be a CEO.
Sure. There's Ben Horowitz, who's a very famous investor of Andreessen Horowitz, talks a lot about how, being a CEO is a job that you can only learn on the job, right? Like there aren't courses that make you a qualified CEO. You have to make tough decisions, and you make a good amount of mistakes on your way to the right ones. I'm curious, we talked about this and we're recording on Veterans Day. Do you see any connections in your military background and experience and the leadership that you bring into your role as a CEO?
I think so. Initially, I didn't. I mean, I'd been out of the Marine Corps for a long time. I was in the Marine Corps for 6 years. I was an artillery officer. So I led units of decent size, units bigger than this company, while I was in. And I thought, okay, I did that. That was great. On to financial services. Sure. But over time, I've seen that it is similar. I mean, it is the closest thing I have done in my life to being a CEO.
Yeah.
Was that unit leadership of 60 or 150 people.
Yeah.
With all the different functions that go into it. I suppose in artillery, you have lots of specialties. I was an officer, you have non-commissioned officers who are really great at what they do, but advise instead of trying to step on the commander's intent. They're trying to help on that and keep me out of trouble, but also in train Marines. And I feel like it's the closest thing I have done to being a CEO.
I'm always curious. I don't get in a ton of conversations with people that have gone from military to the executive world, but there's a lot of people in the executive coaching space, leadership space, especially in the DC area, have military backgrounds. Because there's a rigorous leadership and management training inherent in organizing in the military, and there's frameworks. So you have this idea, you can't stop thinking about it. You have enough sort of political, social capital in your career and in your industry, and you make the step to step away from SoFi and work on this business. What were some of the sort of first indicators beyond this, that you have this idea that this is something that could be big, besides the gut feeling and the vibe and what you could see? What were some of the first validating moments?
I wish there had been more faster. I mean, I think even today, 3 years into this, to an extent, it is that we all here believe we can see the future.
Yeah.
And we are also causing that future. But initially, we had a flagship university in Indiana, Purdue University, a public institution, wanted to try income share agreements. They wanted to try this thing we were doing at Vemo. And they started to talk about it really publicly. We hadn't even incorporated the business yet.
Okay.
And they reached out and said, we heard you doing this. We really want you to bid. We're going to have an RFP. We're going to pick a winner for this. And that was real validation that, look, if other schools like Purdue also wanted to do this, I mean, we might not change the world or build a $1 billion enterprise, but we're certainly not going to starve if we can serve Purdue and its peers well.
How did you get on their radar? Did someone know you? Was there someone, was there a connection?
I am very fortunate that my entire civilian career has been in one industry. Uh-huh. And so, I'd advised people in Indiana on education finance legislation before.
Sure.
And I'd published a paper on income share agreements while I was at SoFi. Not a great idea on my part. I'm lucky they didn't kick me out over that. SoFi was not an income share agreement business. I published a paper with a DC think tank while I was there, and that paper was deemed the leading paper on this for a couple of years. And so that was 2014. So they had read the paper and gotten all inspired at Purdue. And so they were like, well, geez, we gotta talk to this guy. And they had a few ways to get to me.
Sure. As a founder, and I know you meant your whole founding team, by the way, it's interesting that you're the youngest on the team. But as a founder, is there a piece of advice that you've received that you found particularly impactful or meaningful?
Oh, I should have been ready for that kind of question on a podcast like this.
I gave you 35 minutes to warm up.
Right? I mean, I would say that we have, I don't know if anybody's given me advice specifically as a founder, but there are things that come to mind as advice that I've observed or been given. I think one is focus. So a company can't succeed without focus. A lot of founders are idea people and not execution people, and would love to chase the ideas that come to their mind and send their team off chasing ideas. And to succeed strategically, you really need to pick a focus and attack that thing and execute on it. As a co-founder as a lawyer, lawyers have to execute. Like, we don't get away with. We are the people paid to do the details, so we don't get away with not focusing. And I think that's helped me a little bit being from that background. But I think focus is super important, and that compounds over time. Yeah. And you can see lack of focus in businesses that drift.
Totally. I mean, there are a lot of examples and I always say when you hear about something publicly, or when you can notice it publicly, it's systemic privately, because you don't hear about everything. I mean, Uber always comes to mind at this point, like Travis no longer being there, as a CEO, and all the things that sort of started surfacing, honestly, back like as early as 2012, 2013. And it culminated in him leaving. I always tell people that's the public experience that we can see. But there was stuff behind the curtains that really were probably boiling before it got to that point.
There's one other thing. This is advice that I've received and acted on, and also that I give. And so more than telling you what I've received, I'll tell you what I'll give the free advice, which is, I'm a first-time CEO. My co-founders don't need to be watching and wondering whether I'm doing my job. They need to be able to run out and execute in their lanes.
Yeah.
So it's on me to get great as a CEO and to get the help it takes to do that. At Vemo, the way I've done that is recruit a real board.
Yeah.
So I think that advice I would have or give to somebody is, it's not about you, it's about your company. And if it's about your company, the company needs a board of directors and you need a boss. You need to recruit that. It can be from your investors. It could be independents. I have 2 investor directors, 2 independent directors at Vemo. They give a lot of their time and advice. They don't stop me from doing good things. They require that I remain accountable, though, for the decisions I make, and and that I justify decisions that are important for the company. So there's some rigor to governance here. And to my leadership, it lets everybody else relax that, Tonio's not going to turn us into a broom company someday, or, whatever, because he got a fetish for brooms and dustpans. They know which way it's going to go. It lets other investors, institutional investors, get comfortable that if they back us, we have real governance. And in my case, my clients and my capital suppliers are institutional. And they can look at my board and say, well, Tonio's a first-time CEO, but these people are experienced investors and leaders who are on other boards and who they can recognize as positive influences on me.
I think that's such a great example. People talk about surrounding yourself with, high caliber individuals, with people that are smarter than you. But from a point of governance and accountability, I think that's a great lens. And there's another great public example recently with Elon Musk. He was the chairman of the board, and he was the CEO, and he was recently demoted as chairman because things were getting a little reckless at Tesla, and they just promoted someone into that role. To your point, you need someone or a group of people that are at least shepherding a CEO or executives. And it's not to say get in the way and put your own handprint on their business. because that's also not productive. You don't want to micromanage someone like that. But that's a really good point, and I haven't heard it articulated like that, which I appreciate. What we're going to go a little off the founder topic. You can talk about something in the startup world. What's something that you've learned recently that blew your mind?
You're going to have to edit some silence on this one.
That's okay. It's thinking. There's a thinking expression on Tonio's face.
That's right.
Maybe we'll just have my editor play over the Jeopardy soundtrack.
I apologize. I deserve that. Because I'm scatterbrained as heck at the moment. I'll tell you that even though I started a business in this space, it blew my mind the quantity of value expended in acquiring students. So I didn't learn it yesterday.
Okay.
But there are 6,000 or so colleges and universities in the United States who compete outside the top couple hundred. We compete to get in. They compete to enroll about 19 million people in post-secondary ed. And I was like, okay, yeah, they compete. So what does that mean? I just keep learning more and more about how cutthroat that competition is.
Sure.
And how much money is spent on it. So it's surprising to me, I guess, that it is so competitive and that even public institutions and private nonprofits spend a ton of money. Not just advertising or marketing to students, but like there are so many activities at colleges that when you dig like one layer in, they're 100% about student acquisition. And an example would be Division III sports teams.
Division III
sports teams.
Uh-huh.
There are colleges where, gee whiz, this could be a tough thing to talk about or have recorded, but like there are colleges where, you know, your admissions office has a quota of freshmen, and then each sports coach has a quota of freshmen. And your goal is like you find people who might not choose your college except for they've just always wanted to play baseball at the collegiate level or something, and you say, I got a spot for you, you come here. But what they show up, they're a tuition paying student, and they can be a successful alumnus or alumna one day, but a significant portion of the students at a lot of colleges are recruited in these like non-obvious ways. And if you were to step back and like look at what is the real use of a given budget at a school, even ones that you don't think of as trying to grow or spend on advertising, it is a lot. It's way more than I thought. And now every time I look at a college, I can't help it. But like I like look through it. Like I'm not like the Matrix or something.
Yeah.
I'm like looking through it and thinking to myself, well, is that really what it's for? It's hard for me to tell.
I just talked to someone who works. He's in film. He does film production, directing, and he's been working with this big design firm, and they're producing a series of documentaries. He's like, they're not advertising; it's just telling stories about like different design practices. And I was like, but that's kind of advertising, because it's produced by them and like their logo comes up at the end or whatever, and it's like, here's a story about this design methodology, like the history of it, and it is a documentary, but it was produced by this big design company, you know. And so like at the end of the day, it's almost like my show too. Like I don't sell ads on my show. Like that's not the goal. It's, you know, I'm not here to acquire you as a client. I'm here to talk to people when I go around. But it creates this sort of experience. I'm not a university with a D3 sports team, but there are all these layers of how do you engage people? How do you get people's attention? You know, where's your energy spent? If you're not spending tons of money, maybe you're spending time. Where's your energy spent? Or where's your money spent? It's very interesting. With D3, is it that they recruit kids and that then those kids have they have tuition payments? Is that like? Sure.
There's no scholarships in Division III sports.
Right.
Division III athletics. They're supposed to be student athletes, and it's intended that they develop the whole person, you know, as a sport. And so it is. And I can see that they're good for school spirit and everything like that. But when you look at the money spent in the relationship of coach to admissions, there it's like, you've got to go get me.
Oh yeah,
you got to get 5 freshmen on your soccer team.
Well, even in state schools, D1 schools, I think there's an infographic where it's like the number one, the highest paid state employee
Oh, sure.
in like most states, especially ones with big schools, are coaches at state universities. Occasionally there's a surgeon or something, but it's a big number of coaches, football, basketball coaches at D1 programs. It's pretty amazing. Tonio, that's kind of what I got here. This has been a really good conversation. And I'm saying this very earnestly. I love what you're doing. I think that student debt is, it's a travesty. I think that it's changing the next at least 20 to 30 years of our society in a bad way. And we don't know what the major impact is going to be. And I'm excited about what you're working on. And thanks for taking the time. Is there one last thing? Is there a good place for people to find the work that you're doing? Are you still doing writing? How can people follow along or at least check in on what's happening here?
Well, we're at vemo.com, and our website will have things like case studies or announcements about schools who are working with us. Because if you think this is great and you would want to pay for a school this way, we don't sell that at Vemo, right? Our school clients are the ones who have that, and you want to find a school who does it. We're also on social media. And if you look at, for example, Twitter, at VEMOED, at Vemo Ed, you can see every time we're in some great article, we're touting that there. And I think that it's a substantive enough area with enough legit interest that it is not all client press releases. It's real debate. So we've been, in the past 6 months, we've seen income share agreements covered in The Economist and in mainstream press like Washington Post, with thoughtful, the kind of journalists who solicit multiple views and do a thorough work. In terms of more research and writing, I think General Assembly recently did a great white paper on their program, the Catalyst program. We've seen the Aspen Institute publish a white paper that was thoughtful about this, and Omidyar Network, which is funded by the founder of eBay, an impact investor and philanthropy organization. They published a white paper on parent learners and things that can help parent learners, and it touches on paying for success tuition.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was fantastic.
Great.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Founder's Mind. Check back soon to catch a tangent episode with Tonio, where we dive a bit deeper and talk about a common misconception on the age of founders. To make sure you don't miss any awesome wisdom from guests and stay up to date on the most recent episodes of the show, be sure to visit thefoundersmind.com. You can also follow along on social at The Founder's Mind. Last but not least, a thank you to Roy Matz for the music on this show and his dope editing skills that make The Founder's Mind possible. Until next time, take care.
In the world, going through all of this insanity, and try to bring new ideas, make them a reality. Illuminate in the thoughts, make it a priority to implement what you learn. What you get is what you be. In a world full of noise, hard to find that clarity to try to lead subtly, never full of vanity, and try to change something small or try to change humanity. Power forward through the dark, founder's mind is what you see. Founder's mind is what you see.